Lena Matthews stood in the grand hall of the alien embassy, straightening the collar of her uniform as she took in the sight of the imposing alien structures around her. The lights overhead buzzed softly, casting a calm glow across the sleek metallic walls. Today was a critical day. The peace talks between humanity and the Drakian Empire were about to begin. And Lena, as Earth's ambassador, had been preparing for weeks. She had read every report, hailed every alien custom, and practiced the proper greetings for the Drakian representatives. The Drakens were a powerful alien race, known for their advanced technology and strict military culture. The general she would meet today, Zarek, was one of their highest-ranking officers, a legendary figure whose reputation echoed across the galaxy. This meeting could decide the fate of the peace treaty and, perhaps, the future of human-alien relations. Lena took a deep breath as she adjusted her stance, trying to shake off the nerves. She had faced tough situations before, but this felt different. The stakes were too high. There was too much riding on this moment. A soft chime echoed through the room, signaling the arrival of the Drakian delegation. Lena turned to see Zarek walking toward her, his massive form casting a shadow in the dimly lit room. He was an impressive sight, over 8 feet tall, his skin a deep shade of dark green, and his eyes sharp and calculating. His armor adorned with symbols of his rank gleamed under the lights, giving him an almost regal appearance. Zarek stopped a few feet in front of her, his piercing eyes studying her carefully. Lena offered a polite smile, hoping to mask the anxiety she felt.
Ambassador.
Matthew Zarek's voice was deep and rumbling, yet surprisingly warm. It is an honor to finally meet you in person. The honor is mine, General Zarek, Lena replied. Maintaining her composure, despite the feeling of being so small in the presence of this mighty being, they exchanged formal pleasantries.
I'll each one.
Aware of the weight of the words being spoken, the moment felt like a delicate dance. Each glance calculated. The tension in the air was palpable. Both sides had so much to gain and so much to lose. After the initial formalities, Zarek gestured to the table at the center of the room, where they would sit to begin the talks. Lena moved to take a seat, but Zarek stopped her with a slight gesture of his hand. Before we proceed, he said, his voice calm yet firm. There is one tradition among my people that must be observed. It is a gesture of goodwill, a sign of trust. Lena tilted her head slightly, curious but willing to follow his lead. Zarek stepped closer, extending one massive hand toward her. She blinked in surprise. This was not something she had expected. According to the reports she had read, physical contact was generally avoided in Drakian culture. It was considered too intimate, too revealing. However, she had prepared for many things. She extended her hand to meet his, unsure of what to expect. As their hands made contact, Lena felt a sudden surge of warmth spreading through her body, an unexpected pulse of energy. She quickly pulled her hand back, blinking in confusion. Zarek seemed to sense her hesitation and gave her a reassuring nod. It is a sign of peace, Ambassador, he explained. A gesture to show that we come not as enemies, but as allies in the making. Lena smiled, trying to mask the strange sensation that lingered in her hand. I understand, General. Thank you for the gesture. Zarek withdrew his hand, and they both sat down at the table. The peace talks began, with discussions about trade agreements, territorial boundaries, and the mutual benefits of cooperation between humanity and the Drakian Empire. Lena kept her focus, knowing that her every word would be scrutinized. Despite this strange start to the meeting, she couldn't afford to lose control now. But as the hours passed, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Her hand still tingled slightly, and the warmth from the handshake had lingered longer than she expected. She tried to push the feeling aside, focusing instead on the matter at hand. But every so often, she felt her thoughts drifting to that moment when their hands touched. What had that strange pulse been? It was unlike anything she had experienced before. As the meeting drew to a close, Lena and Zarek stood once more. Zarek bowed slightly, a gesture of respect. I look forward to our continued discussions, Ambassador, he said. Likewise, General Zarek, Lena replied, offering a smile that was both professional and genuine. She hoped this would be the beginning of something positive between their species. As they exchanged a final, respectful handshake, Lena's mind was still occupied by the strange sensation she had felt. Something had changed, but she wasn't sure what. The next few days passed in a blur as the talks continued. Lena remained focused, trying to ignore the odd feelings that had followed her since the handshake. But deep down, she couldn't shake the sense that there was more to this meeting than she had first realized. Lena Matthews sat at her desk in the embassy, staring at the stack of reports in front of her. The days since the meeting with General Zarek had passed quickly, but something felt off. Her head throbbed with a dull ache, and a strange sensation lingered in her hand. She couldn't explain it. It was as if something had shifted inside her. The moment her skin had touched his, the uneasy feeling refused to fade, and Lena found herself struggling to concentrate. She tried to push it out of her mind, but it only grew stronger. Each time she looked at her hand, she could still feel the warmth of Zarek's touch. It made her feel as though something was wrong. But what could it possibly be? Over the next few days, Lena tried to focus on her work. The peace talks were moving along well, and everyone around her seemed to be getting more optimistic about the possibility of a successful agreement. But every time she sat in a meeting or reviewed documents, her mind wandered back to Zarek. She didn't know why. She had met many important leaders before, but this was different. This wasn't just about the talks, it was something deeper. The strange sensations continued. The headaches grew worse, and soon, Lena found herself feeling more tired than usual. She woke up each morning feeling drained, as if she hadn't rested at all. At first, she thought it was just the stress of the negotiations, but soon it became clear that something else was at play. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Lena sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were a little duller than usual, and her skin seemed a bit paler. She reached up to touch her face, wondering if it was just exhaustion showing itself in new ways. But something inside her told her that this wasn't the usual fatigue. As the days went on, Lena became more aware of her changing body. At first, it was subtle. A little nausea in the morning, slight dizziness when she stood up too quickly. But the symptoms kept building, and she could no longer ignore them. Finally, she decided to go to the embassy's medical office. She sat nervously in the sterile white room, waiting for the doctor to arrive. When the door opened, Lena greeted Dr. Marks, the head physician, with a forced smile. "Good evening, Ambassador," Dr. Marks said, adjusting his glasses as he looked at the medical chart in his hands. "What seems to be the problem?" Lena hesitated for a moment. She wasn't sure how to explain it, but she knew something wasn't right. "I've been feeling strange," she said softly. "Tired, dizzy, and I've had these headaches for days now. I'm not sure what's happening." Dr. Marks raised an eyebrow and gestured for her to lie down on the examination table. "Let's take a look then." He examined her carefully, running several tests. Lena tried to remain calm, but her heart raced as she waited for the results. What was happening to her? After a few minutes, Dr. Marks stepped back, looking at the readings on the screen in front of him. Lena could see his face tighten with concern, though he tried to hide it. He cleared his throat. "Ambassador," he said slowly, "I have some unexpected news." Lena felt her stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" Dr. Marks hesitated before speaking. "You're pregnant, Ambassador." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She blinked, stunned. "That's impossible," she whispered. I don't understand. How could I be pregnant?" Dr. Marks looked at her sympathetically. "I'm afraid I don't have all the answers, but based on the medical scans, it seems that you're carrying a child. And judging by the timing, it must have happened shortly after your meeting with General Zarek." Lena's mind raced, her thoughts spinning in every direction. She had to be hearing this wrong. This was some kind of mistake, right? She had never been in a relationship with anyone. She hadn't even been on a date in months. How could this be happening? "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice shaking. "There's no other explanation?" Dr. Marks nodded. "I understand that this is difficult to believe, but the results are clear. You're pregnant, Ambassador." "And from what?" "I can tell. The child is... unusual. This isn't something I've ever seen before. The biology is ... foreign. Lena swallowed hard, trying to process the information. Her mind was a whirlwind of confusion and fear. How could this be happening? The only thing she could think of was the handshake with Zarek, but that was impossible. She had heard of alien species with different biological traits, but never anything like this. I don't understand, Lena said, her voice barely above a whisper. What does this mean for me? What do I do now? Dr. Marks gave her a reassuring, "Look, I wish I had more answers, Asador. But for now, we'll need to monitor your health carefully. You may experience more symptoms in the coming days, and you should try to get some rest." Lena nodded absently, her mind still reeling. The doctor left the room, leaving her alone with the terrifying news. She stood up, her legs shaking as she made her way to the window. The sky outside was dark, the stars twinkling far beyond the embassy's walls. What was she supposed to do now? And how would Zarek react when she told him? Lena Matthews stood in front of the mirror, her eyes staring at her reflection. The news from the doctor had shaken her to the core, and now everything seemed different. Her mind raced with 1,000 questions, but the one that repeated itself over and over was simple. How could this be happening? The more Lena thought about it, the more she realized that there was only one event that could explain everything: the handshake with General Zarek. That thought made her stomach tighten in fear. She had never imagined that a simple gesture, a moment of diplomacy, could lead to something so life-changing. The idea that she was pregnant with an alien child seemed absurd, yet the medical scan left no room for doubt. She was pregnant, and it was his child. Lena walked to her desk and picked up the datapad that had been sitting there, waiting for her to check the latest updates on the peace talks. She had barely glanced at it since the meeting with Zarek. Her mind was too occupied with everything else. Oh, she had to put her feelings aside. The talks needed to continue. The future of both humanity and the Drakian Empire depended on it. But how could she focus on negotiations when everything inside her had changed so suddenly? As she sat down, Lena tapped the screen and sent a message to Zarek. She couldn't avoid him any longer. She had to tell him what had happened. She couldn't carry this burden alone. She waited. Minutes passed, feeling like hours. Then the screen beeped, and Zarek's message appeared. "Ambassador Matthews, I received your message. We need to meet. Please come to the embassy as soon as possible." Lena's heart pounded as she read his words. It was time. She had no choice but to face the truth. She had to tell him what had happened, what they had done without meaning to. The meeting room at the embassy felt colder than usual. Lena sat at the long table, her fingers nervously tapping against the surface. Across from her, General Zarek walked in. His massive form filled the doorway, his dark green skin and sharp features as intimidating as ever. But today, his presence didn't bring the usual sense of command. Instead, it felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. Zarek sat down across from her, his sharp eyes studying her carefully. "Ambassador," he said softly, his voice still deep but now tinged with concern. "I received your message. You seemed urgent." Lena took a deep breath, her fingers clenched tightly in her lap. This was harder than she had imagined. "General," she began, her voice shaking slightly. "I don't know how to say this, but I need to tell you something." Zarek's eyes narrowed, his expression serious. "What is it?" Lena hesitated for a moment before speaking, her words coming out slowly. "It's about the handshake."
After it,
The words hung in the air between them. Zarek blinked, clearly taken aback. He had heard of rare biological occurrences in his people, but this was beyond anything he could have expected. "You're saying quotes were pregnant?" Zarek's voice was low, a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "But how? I didn't mean for this to happen. Our biology. It shouldn't work that way with humans." Lena nodded, her heart pounding. "I know, but it did," the doctor confirmed. There is no mistake." Zarek sat back in his chair, running a large hand through his short hair. He was clearly struggling to process the information. Lena could see the tension in his posture as he tried to make sense of it all. This is impossible, he muttered. To himself, the handshake. I didn't know it could have that effect. Lena swallowed, her eyes focusing on Zarek. I don't know how this happened, but I'm scared. And I don't know what to do next. This isn't something either of us expected, but I can't ignore it. You're part of this now. Zarek leaned forward, his face softening for the first time. He could see the fear in Lena's eyes, and it mirrored his own feelings. I never wanted this to happen. I only wished to build a better future with humanity, to end the war and ensure peace. But now, ... He paused, his gaze meeting hers. Now, it seems we've created something entirely different. Lena lowered her gaze, feeling overwhelmed. What does this mean for us? What does it mean for the peace talks? Zarek's voice was steady, but full of emotion. I don't know, but I will make this right. We'll figure this out together. Lena looked up at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. But how? What happens now? Zarek took a deep breath, considering his next words carefully.
I do
not have all the answers, Ambassador, but I can promise you this. We will handle this together, no matter what. I will support you, and we will find a way forward for both you and the child. Lena felt a strange sense of comfort in his words. Despite the shocking nature of the situation, she realized that Zarek wasn't as detached as she had feared. He was willing to stand by her, even in the face of something so unexpected. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new, something that could bring them closer. Despite the impossible circumstances, "Thank you, General," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know what I would do without you." Zarek nodded, his expression resolute. "We will face this together, Ambassador. Whatever comes next, we will face it as allies." And in that moment, for the first time since receiving the news, Lena felt a small spark of hope. Lena Matthews sat in her quarters, staring out the window. The stars outside twinkled in the endless darkness, but tonight she didn't feel any sense of awe. She felt lost, uncertain. The conversation with General Zarek had left her with more questions than answers.
Ow.
Could something as simple as a handshake lead to this? Was this really happening? Could they make it work? The idea of being pregnant with Zarek's child was still hard to believe. It seemed like a dream, one that she would wake up from. But the reality was staring her in the face, growing inside her. She had never imagined anything like this happening, especially not in her role as an ambassador. But now her life was connected to Zarek's, and there was no turning back. There was a knock at her door, snapping her out of her thoughts. Lena took a deep breath and stood, wiping the tears from her eyes before she opened the door. Zarek stood in the doorway, his tall form casting a shadow across the room. He looked as serious as ever. But there was something different in his eyes, a quiet understanding. "Ambassador Matthews," Zarek said softly, his voice warm. "Can we talk?" Lena nodded, stepping aside to let him enter. She felt a mix of relief and fear. She wasn't sure what to expect from him, but she needed answers just as much as he did. They both had to understand what had happened and what their next steps would be. Zarek walked over to the small table near the window and sat down. Lena followed, sitting across from him. There was a long moment of silence as they both gathered their thoughts. "I have spent a great deal of time thinking about what you said," Zarek began, breaking the silence. "And I realize now that I need to explain more about my people's biology, about why what happened happened." Lena looked at him, her curiosity piqued. She nodded for him to continue. "Among the Drakian people," Zarek said, choosing his words carefully, "there is a rare phenomenon, something we have long believed to be a myth, something that occurs very rarely, but not impossible. It is called the bond of the touch, the act of a physical handshake. An intimate connection can sometimes trigger a deep bond between two beings. In most cases, this bond is only formed between two Drakens, but it can sometimes occur with other species." Lena listened closely, her mind struggling to catch up with the gravity of his words. "Are you saying that this bond is what happened to us?" Zarek nodded slowly. "Yes. The moment we touched, there was something in me that recognized you. It was as if our bodies, our beings knew each other in this bond. It is stronger than anything I have ever felt. I never expected it to work this way with a human, but it happened. Lena was quiet, trying to process the information. This was a lot to take in, but she couldn't deny the strange sensations that had been overwhelming her since that moment. She could feel the connection too, but she had never thought it could be something biological, something so powerful. I don't understand, Lena said, her voice trembling. How could something like this happen with me? I'm human. I don't have the same biology as you, and I never asked for this. Rock leaned forward, his expression sincere. I know. This is difficult, Ambassador. I never wanted to put you in this position. I never intended for this to happen. I also cannot deny the truth of it. It is not something that can be ignored, no matter how strange it seems. The child is real, and so is the bond we share. Lena took a deep breath, trying to calm the swirling thoughts in her head. What does this mean for me? For us? What am I supposed to do with this? Connection. Zarek's gaze softened. You are not alone in this. I will support you, Lena. I will make sure that you are not left to face this alone. As for the child, it will be part of both our world's humanity and the Drakens. We will protect it. We will protect you. Lena felt a lump form in her throat as she met Zarek's gaze. She wasn't sure what the future would hold, but she knew one thing. She couldn't face it alone. Zarek, despite his strange ways, seemed to genuinely care, and that gave her some small measure of comfort. But what about the peace talks? Lena asked, still unsure. How does this affect everything? The talks. Are people everything? Zarek looked at her, his expression unwavering. The peace talks will continue, Ambassador. If anything, this will strengthen our resolve. We'll ensure that no one uses this bond to weaken our negotiations. We are both here for peace. This is simply another way to show that humans and Drakens can work together, no matter how difficult the path may be. Lena nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. Perhaps Zarek was right. The situation was strange, even impossible, but they would face it together. There would be challenges ahead of that, she was sure. But for the first time since the news broke, she felt like they might just be able to handle it. I still don't know what this means for the future, Lena admitted, but I'm willing to try. I don't want to lose everything we've worked for. You won't lose anything, Lena, Zarek said, his voice strong and certain. Together, we will create a future. Lena smiled softly, feeling a small sense of hope bloom in her chest. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, she felt like she wasn't facing it alone. Lena Matthews sat in her office at the embassy, staring out the window at the city below. The streets were alive with people, vehicles moving in a constant rhythm, yet she felt disconnected from it all. Her thoughts were consumed by the recent events with Zarek. Everything had changed so quickly. And now, the peace talks, the growing bond between them, and the baby inside her were all tangled together in a way that felt overwhelming. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking a path no one had ever walked before. It was as though she was caught between two worlds, struggling to find her place in both. The human ambassador to the Drakian Empire, and yet a mother carrying the child of one of their most powerful generals. Lena had been quiet in the last few days, focusing on the talks, trying to remain composed in front of the delegates. But the weight of the situation was heavy. There were moments when the pressure of everything would hit her all at once, and she would have to fight back the tears. How could she balance this strange new life with the responsibility of leading humanity through such an important time? There was a knock at her door, pulling her from her thoughts. She turned to see General Zarek standing in the doorway, his massive figure filling the space. Despite the seriousness of the situation, Lena couldn't help but feel a strange comfort in his presence. He had become more than just an ally. They were in this together now, for better or worse. Ambassador Matthews, Zarek said, his voice calm, but there was a hint of concern in his eyes. I thought it might be a good time to discuss the next steps in the peace talks. Talks have been progressing well, but I believe we should continue to focus on strengthening our alliance. Lena smiled softly at his words, despite everything. Zarek's resolve had never wavered. He had taken the news of their bond with such seriousness determined to make sure they both found a way through this unexpected situation. She admired him for that. "I agree," she replied, standing up and motioning for him to sit. "We've made progress, but I feel like we're still in the early stages of building trust. This situation complicates things, but it also gives us a chance to prove that humans and Dracons can overcome any obstacle." Zarek nodded, his sharp eyes studying her carefully. "Indeed, the bond between us is something we must honor, Lena, but it is also something that can be used to build a stronger future, not just for us, but for our people as well." Lena paused, feeling a wave of emotion wash over her. She had been so focused on the challenges ahead, fear of what others would think, that she had forgotten why she was doing this in the first place. It wasn't just for the peace talks or for the negotiations, it was for the future, for a world where humans and Dracons could work together. "I know this is difficult," Lena said softly, looking out the window again. "But we have a chance to show the galaxy that peace is possible, even in the most unexpected situations." Zarek stood, walking over to the window next to her. His large form cast a shadow over the room, but Lena felt a sense of strength from his presence. "We do have a chance, Lena," he said, his voice steady, "but we cannot allow others to divide us. There are forces both in our ranks and yours that will seek to use our bond against us. They will try to turn this into a weakness." Lena turned to face him, her expression serious. "I know. But I believe that together we can turn this into our strength." Zarek's eyes softened as he looked at her. "I believe that as well." For a moment they both stood in silence, watching the city below. There was so much at stake, yet in that quiet moment, it felt as though they were the only two people in the world. They had both been through so much unexpected challenges, overwhelming emotions, but they had made it this far. Together, Lena's hand rested lightly on her stomach, feeling the small flutter of movement that reminded her of the life growing inside her. It was strange how connected she felt to this child already, even though it had only been a short time since she had learned of the pregnancy. She knew that this child would be a symbol of their bond, but it was also more than that. It was the future, her future, Zarek's future, the future of both their peoples. "We will protect the peace talks," Lena said firmly, "and we will protect the child. We'll face whatever comes next together." Zarek nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. "We will. And we will do it with strength and honor." The next few days passed with a renewed sense of purpose. Zarek and Lena worked closely together, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. They continued their meetings, discussing the peace talks and the future of the alliance. Despite the challenges they faced, their commitment to each other and to the greater good remained unshaken as the talks progressed. There were whispers among both human and Drakian delegates. Some were skeptical of the relationship between the human ambassador and the alien general, but many were beginning to see the strength in their alliance. The two of them had become a symbol of hope for those who believed that peace could be achieved. Even through the most unlikely of circumstances, Lena knew that there would always be those who would seek to tear them apart, to use their bond as a weakness. But as long as she and Zarek stood together, she knew they could face whatever challenges came their way. Together, they were unstoppable. The days that followed were filled with constant meetings, endless discussions, and a growing tension in the air. The peace talks between humanity and the Drakian Empire were moving forward. But the complications surrounding Lena and Zarek's unexpected bond were far from over. Whispers spread through both the human and Drakian ranks, and the pressure was beginning to mount. Lena could feel the eyes on her wherever she went. There was no escaping the truth now. She had become the center of attention, not only because of her role as an ambassador, but because of the mysterious and unusual connection she shared with General Zarek. Some people whispered that their bond was a sign of something more, something dangerous. Others saw it as a powerful symbol of unity between the two species. But no matter what others thought, Lena knew one thing for sure. Her life had been changed forever. One morning, as Lena walked through the embassy halls, she overheard a conversation between two human diplomats. Their voices were low, but she could still catch the words. Did you hear? The general and the ambassador. It's not just a handshake, you know. There's more to it. It could ruin everything. Lena felt a pang of frustration. They didn't understand. How could they? They hadn't been through what she had. They hadn't felt the strange connection, pull between her and Zarek, that seemed to grow stronger each day. But it wasn't just the humans who were uneasy. On the Drakian side, there were whispers too. Lena had received word from one of the Drakian delegates, Commander Korin, who had expressed concern over Zarek's actions. Korin had long been a skeptic of Zarek's leadership, and now he seemed to question Zarek's decisions even more. The tensions were beginning to boil over. Every word Lena spoke was scrutinized. Every move she made carefully observed. The political environment was more charged than ever. What was once a diplomatic meeting now felt like a battleground, and Lena was caught in the middle. Zarek could see the pressure building in Lena, and he felt it too. He knew that he had made promises to her to support her, to protect her, but the reality of their situation was far more complicated than he had ever anticipated. He had never imagined that his bond with Lena would lead to so much division. He had hoped that it would be a symbol of unity, but it had become a source of division. One evening, after a particularly difficult day of negotiations, Zarek visited Lena in her office. She had been sitting alone, staring at the glowy, dingy screen in front of her, but her mind was far away. She looked up when he entered, a small, tired smile on her face. "Zarek," she said softly, "you didn't have to come." Shh. Zarek shook his head. "I wanted to see how you were doing, Ambassador." Lena sighed, standing up and walking to the window. "I don't know how much longer I can handle this. There's so much pressure from both sides. People are starting to doubt the peace talks because of what's happening between us. It feels like everything is falling apart." Zarek's expression softened, and he walked over to stand beside her. He didn't have all the answers, but he could feel her frustration and pain. "I know, Lena. This was never meant to happen this way. But we will get through this. We have to." Lena turned to face him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "But what if we can't? What if all of this, our bond, our child, it's too much? What if it ruins everything we've worked for?" Zarek placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice gentle but firm. "You're not alone in this, Lena. I made a promise to you, and I will keep it. Whatever happens, we will face it together." Lena nodded, feeling comforted by his words, but the weight of the situation was still heavy on her heart. She had never felt so torn between two worlds, her duty to humanity, responsibility as an ambassador, and now her connection to Zarek. Every decision felt impossible. The next day, the situation worsened. Commander Korin, who had been openly critical of Zarek's actions, made a public statement questioning the validity of the peace talks. He insinuated that Zarek's bond with Lena was a distraction, and that the peace process was being undermined by personal feelings rather than political strategy. The statement sent shockwaves through both the Drakian Empire and the human delegation. Lena was furious. She had worked so hard to bring both sides together, and now one man's words threatened to destroy everything. But she couldn't just sit back and let it happen. She had to act. That afternoon, she called a meeting with Zarek and the other key figures in the peace talks. They sat around a large table, the weight of the conversation hanging over them. "I'm not going to let this derail everything we've worked for," Lena said, her voice steady despite the anger she felt. "Commander Korin may not believe in what we're doing, but I do. And I believe that this bond, this child, it can be a symbol of what we can achieve together, not a weakness." Zarek nodded, his gaze fierce. "Lena is right. We have come too far to let this fall apart now. The peace talks will continue, and we will not let anyone divide us." Lena looked around the room at the faces of the other delegates. There was a moment of silence, and then one by one they all nodded in agreement. The peace talks would continue, despite the challenges. Despite the doubts, the days following the tense meeting were filled with determination. The peace talks, though strained, had not been derailed. Lena Matthews and Zarek's bond, one say, the source of uncertainty and suspicion, had become the catalyst for a shift in the negotiations. Both sides were slowly beginning to see the potential of their connection, even if it was an unusual one. There was still resistance, but there was also hope. Lena and Zarek had agreed that the peace talks must continue despite the challenges they faced. The pressure from both the human and Drakian delegates had been immense, but Lena had made it clear that she would not back down. She had a responsibility to both humanity and to the future of the peace process. And with Zarek by her side, she believed they could succeed. Today, the atmosphere in the embassy was tense but hopeful. Lena walked into the conference room, her footsteps echoing in the empty hall. She had been working tirelessly, preparing for the final round of talks. There were still key issues to resolve: trade agreements, military alliances, and territorial disputes. But now, there was a new urgency. The future of their peoples was in their hands, and they couldn't afford to fail. As she entered the room, she saw Zarek already seated at the table waiting for her. His calm presence gave her a sense of peace, something she had desperately needed in the chaos of the past few days. The bond between them had grown stronger, and with every passing moment, Lena found herself relying more on Zarek's unwavering support. Ambassador Matthew Zarek greeted her, standing as she entered. "Good aid," she replied with a small smile, settling into her seat across from him. "Ready for today?" Zarek nodded, his gaze sharp. "We have no choice but to succeed. The future of both our species depends on what happens here," Lena agreed, but she couldn't help but feel the weight of it all. She had never imagined that her first assignment as an ambassador would be this complex. But now more than ever, she understood the importance of what they were doing. She wasn't just representing humanity. She was representing something much larger, something that could change the galaxy. The meeting began, and the room fell into a quiet intensity. The human and Drakian delegates spoke first, presenting their proposals and concerns. There was still tension in the room, but it was different now. There was a shared understanding that they had to make this work. After hours of discussions, the final topic came up: the future relationship between humanity and the Drakian Empire. It was the most delicate issue of all. How would their peoples coexist? What would their alliance look like? How could they ensure peace for generations to come? Lena cleared her throat, standing up to speak. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to her. "We have come a long way," she began, her voice strong despite the nerves she felt. "When we first began these talks, we were strangers. We didn't know if we could trust each other. But we are here today because we both understand the importance of cooperation. The bond between me and General Zarek is more than just a symbol. It's a sign of what we can achieve together. It may be unusual, but it is real. And it shows that we can overcome our differences if we work together." Lena looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the delegates from both sides. Some still looked skeptical, but others were nodding. Seeing the potential for a future they had never thought possible, Zarek stood up beside her, his voice calm but filled with determination. "The peace talks are not just about agreements. On paper, they are about the people behind those agreements. We, as leaders, must set an example. We must show our people that peace is possible. That unity is not just a dream, but a reality we can build together." Lena smiled, feeling a sense of pride in the words they had spoken. They had faced so much uncertainty, but now, standing before these delegates, they were more than just two individuals. They were a symbol of something greater. Their bond, though unexpected, had the power to unite entire civilizations. The room was silent for a moment, and then one by one, the delegates began to speak. The human representatives voiced their support, acknowledging the progress they had made. The Drakian delegates, too, expressed their willingness to move forward. Despite their initial doubts, as the discussions drew to a close, a new sense of optimism filled the room. The peace talks were far from over, but for the first time, the future seemed possible. The room buzzed with the hope of what lay ahead: new alliances, new friendships, and the promise of peace. Lena and Zarek stood together, side by side. They had fought for this moment, and now it was theirs. They had proven that even in the most unlikely of situations, unity was possible. And they had shown the galaxy that humans and Drakons could find common ground, despite their differences. As the delegates began to leave, Lena turned to Zarek, her heart full. "We did it," she said quietly. Zarek nodded, his eyes meeting hers with a sense of pride. "We did. Together." And in that moment, Lena realized that this was just the beginning. The future they had worked for was now within their grasp. They had taken the first step toward a new year one of cooperation, understanding and unity between their peoples. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges and there would be setbacks. But they had proven that they could face anything together. Lena smiled as she looked out the window, the stars shining brightly in the distance. The galaxy had changed that day, and so had they.